goodness!
Kimmel and I got
Kimmel?
apparently late.
We don't care about Kimmel. You voted for your favourite 10 moments of the year. I'll reveal them all tonight. I want to begin with our big story, the war over Duck Dynasty. Joining me now is CNN political commentators Ben Ferguson and Mark Lamont Hill, and Michael Brown, the radio host of The Line of Fire and the author of A Queer Thing Happened to America. Welcome to all of you. OK, so this thing has caught fire today, and it's much more than just about Duck Dynasty. Let me start with you, Ben Ferguson, because Bill O'Reilly, of all people, has tonight come out and said, Mr. Robertson, I believe, made a mistake by the condemnation line, and here's why. It's not about the Bible or believing or not believing in the Bible. It's about singling out a group. It could be anyone, and saying to that group, hey, you're not worthy in the eyes of the Lord because of who you are. And Mr. O'Reilly, I've never been your biggest fan, but I salute you for that, because that surely is what this is really about, Ben Ferguson. It's about targeting gays in America and saying you are not worthy in the eyes of the Lord.
I don't think so at all. And if you actually look at what he said in the article in GQ, he also named about 11 other sins that you're selectively deciding to leave out. He was asked, what are sins in this country? And he listed significant ones, including greed, including lying, including stealing, and those were in the same list. So I think this is an issue of GQ magazine choosing to highlight this one to try to start some massive war over a guy that is not very articulate. He is incredibly blunt, but I think the way he said it was, I think, not eloquent at all, and I would have said
Hang on. Wait. He is articulate, because actually TMZ unearthed a sermon he made in 2010 in Pennsylvania. And in part of that sermon, he says this: women with women, men with men, they committed indecent acts with one another, and they received in themselves a due penalty for their perversions. Their school of murder, envy, strife, hatred. They are insolent, arrogant, God-haters. They are heartless, they are faithless, they are senseless, they are ruthless. They invent ways of doing evil. That's what you have 245 years roughly after your forefathers founded the country. What are you going to do, Pennsylvania? Just run with them? You're going to die? Mark Lamont Hill, this guy is just a bigot. Isn't he?
It's absolutely clear that he is a bigot. And this isn't the case of him listing 11 sins and gay just happened to be on the list. The centerpiece of the conversation were gay and lesbian people, and then he compared them to other things, including bestiality. And now when you add this 2010 sermon to it, it is absolutely disturbing and disgusting that he's using Christianity as an excuse, as a pretext for really just being a hate monger.
Mark, this is my big issue is, if you actually, again, read what he said in GQ, he did not equate being gay with bestiality. He said in that same statement, if you actually read it and stop trying to fabricate there's a connection, he never connected the two together. You cannot like him for what he says.
Wait a minute. Let me read the statement so there can be absolute clarity. It seems to me a vagina as a man would be more desirable than a man's anus. Start with homosexual behavior and morph out from there. Bestiality, sleeping around with this woman and that woman, and those men, it's not right. He is condemning, forget what else he's condemning a homosexual behavior, isn't he, Ben? That's what he's doing.
Well, sure he is, and he believes that, along with the other list that he went into with Corinthians, are sins that he is obviously against and has been on the show forever. I would never have said it the way he said it. Let me make that clear. But let's not put words in his mouth and take it for what it is. He did not equate being gay with bestiality. He also made it very clear in there.
Let me bring in Dr. Michael Brown. What is your view of this, sir?
First, he did express things in a rather crude way, but what you got very upset about, quoting from his message in Pennsylvania, that was mainly the words of Paul in Romans, the 1st chapter. It's not bigoted to say that God designed a man to be with a woman. It's not bigoted to say that sexual acts outside of male-female marriage are prohibited in Scripture. We could debate that. It's not bigoted to say it. To me, what's bigoted is that he gets fired. Look, you have reality TV shows celebrating polygamy, celebrating polyamory, celebrating teen sex, gay kids losing their virginity as teenagers on Glee. That's fine. That's not a problem. That's to be celebrated. When he says, you know, I'm a Bible thumper, I hold to biblical values, I believe a man was made by God to be with a woman, and I hold to these things. How is that bigoted? How is that basis for being fired from the show?
I hear this a lot from so-called Christian... Well, wait a minute. I hear this a lot from so-called Christians. I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic, and I can look at the Bible and say parts of it are obviously utterly ridiculous. There is a part of the Bible that says if you as a woman are not a virgin on your wedding night, you should be stoned to death. Clearly, that is not what Mr. Robertson is espousing today, because he would know that is ridiculous. There are lots of offensive things in the Bible. But let me ask you this, sir. As a Christian man, can you point to a single public utterance by Jesus Christ, the Christ in Christianity, about gay people or about a gay lifestyle? Can you name one single thing?
Go to Sodom and Gomorrah.
Of course, I'll name three for you, Pierce. Number one, in Matthew 5, Jesus said he didn't come to abolish the Torah, but to fulfill. He takes the sexual morals of the Torah to a higher level. Number two, in Matthew 15, he says all sexual acts committed outside of marriage defile the human being. And in Matthew 19, he says marriage, as God intended it, is the union of one man and one woman for life. Look, Jesus did not address wife beating or heroin shooting, but we don't use that argument for silence. But in point of fact, he, as a first-century Jew, of course he reinforced these things. And Pierce, right, I'd encourage you to restudy what Scripture says. We should love our neighbor as ourselves, but that doesn't mean that we approve everything of our neighbor.
But there are several problems with that interpretation. One,
Mark Lamont Hill first.
One, the New Testament absolutely does offer the words and the voice of Jesus, and he very explicitly does not talk about being gay. And even the scripture you cited about marriage is very different than talking about being gay. And even if you say that
marriage is one man and one woman, though, sir.
Let me finish. I heard everything you said. I just want to respond to it. When you say, if you're saying that he's confirming the Old Testament, well, the Old Testament is far from clear around gay marriage or around gay acts.
Are you sure about that?
If you let me finish, I'll tell you how I'm sure about it. The book of Leviticus, according to most biblical scholars, is not about being gay. If you talk about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, for example, it's really about being inhospitable to neighbors. It's about prostitution. It's about many other things. It's
Leviticus 18. Hebrew scholarship is my background. I have a PhD in Semitic languages. Leviticus 18 is quite explicit. For a man to lie with a man is contrary to what God intended. Right, the rectum is part of the disposal system. It's not meant for sexuality. God designed a man to be with a woman. That's pretty obvious. That's not hateful to say it. That's obvious. And really, the Hebrew scriptures are clear on this, sir.
There are few biblical interpretations that can be understood without context. And again, many...
Mark, here's the problem.
Wait a minute. Let me just say this. It wasn't just what he said about gays. Deeply offensive, though I find what he said, and many other people do, I can still understand people say, well, you know, it's my religious belief that homosexuality is a sin. I think it's a load of absolute phooey in the modern age to be so bigoted, but if that's what people want to do, that's fine. What I find more reprehensible than that was what he said about African Americans. And he said this: I never heard one of them. This is what he's talking about when he was in the cotton fields. I never heard one of them, one black person, say, I tell you what, those doggone white people, not a word. Pre-entitlement, pre-welfare. You say, were they happy? They were godly. They were happy. No one was singing the blues. This guy needs to go and watch 12 Years a Slave, doesn't he, Mark Lamont Hill?
Or just have common sense. I mean, it's actually an absurd idea here that somehow blacks weren't complaining. It's just ridiculous. I mean, for me, this is someone who's clearly bigoted, someone who clearly doesn't have a sense of history, and someone who represents, quite honestly, a mindset that isn't exclusive to him. There are many people in America who believe this, but corporations have a right to say, we don't want to stand next to this type of person.
But here's what's remarkable.
This is
respond directly.
Yeah.
But Ben Ferguson, respond directly to what he said about African Americans. I mean, surely you must find that deeply offensive.
Look, I don't think that that's the reality that most people were around. From his perspective, I can't call him a liar if he never heard someone that didn't say that to him. And let's be honest, this guy lives in the backwoods, and he very well may believe this. That doesn't mean that he's going to lie to the American people about it. But I go back to the core of this tonight that really hurts me the most.
Let me just read that again to you, Ben. Wait a minute. Pre-entitlement, pre-welfare. You say, were they happy? They were happy. No one was singing the blues. But once those black people in America got entitlement and welfare, whoa, they got miserable.
Pierce, this is unbelievable. Pierce, the outrageous thing here.
The best part of that quote is that black people actually invented the blues, and they invented the blues literally as a response to social misery, the very social misery that he's suggesting didn't exist pre-entitlement, pre-welfare. It's absolutely ridiculous.
But here's what's more ridiculous. The media has not been focusing on this. What's really really outrageous is that those comments are not the ones that got him booted off A&E. GLAAD and HRC and these others immediately took exception to the other things. So, Pierce, if we wanted to discuss this and see, wow, we know his perspective, he considered himself one of them, he was working with them, that's his perspective, sounds very odd to me. I agree. I would never say that. But the fact is, that's not where the outcry was. That shows us the extraordinary bias against a Christian holding to a biblical view of marriage and sexuality.
It's not a biblical view of marriage.
Okay, Ben Ferguson. Whoa,
show me one example of gay marriage in the Bible.
Today, I want to say this. This is my problem with this. There is the Bible, and there's right and wrong, and Scripture is going to offend people and all sins. But what irks me the most about this today is even you, Pierce, tweeted out a article that came from the Hollywood Life that said in the article, and I want to quote it, it said, he said gay people won't go to heaven and that being gay could lead to bestiality. That is a lie. That is fabricated. He never said gay people don't go to heaven. And yet this is what the liberal media is doing, and you send it out there so people read these articles and they think, wow, all Christians think that gay people don't go to heaven, which is not true. And yet it's being sent out all over the world as fact when it's not what he said.
Talk about splitting hairs. He said this. Start with homosexual behavior. And wait. Start with homosexual behavior and just morph out from there. Bestiality. That's what he went to next.
But then he also talks about men sleeping with other women. Where are all the heterosexual men calling in and complaining and saying, look, he said if I sleep around with other women, that's like bestiality. Why is it that only one group responds this particular way? Why is it that homosexuality can be celebrated on the media, that polygamy, polyamory can be celebrated in the media, and when someone says, I take issue with it morally and I believe God designed a man to be with a woman, he gets booted off of A&E? How can that possibly be?
He didn't just take a
Wait a minute.
He didn't just take...
Dr. Brown, nobody is celebrating being gay. People are saying they would like gay people in America.
Kidding?
No one's celebrating homosexuality. No one is celebrating homosexuality.
Let me finish.
Seriously?
Let me finish. Sorry, with respect, it is my show. Dr. Brown, what they are doing is they are trying to espouse the same rights for gay people in America as for straight people like you. Why should you, Dr. Michael Brown, be entitled to more rights in America than somebody who's gay? Give me
Should a
one
man
good
have a right
answer.
to marry 3 women? Do you
No,
feel
I
a
asked
man
Dr.
should have a
Brown.
right to marry 3 women? Should a man have a grown man, to marry his grown daughter if he wants to? Should he have that right?
Right, so
Piers Morgan,
you
should he have
personally
that
would
right,
like
sir?
to have. You would personally like to have more rights than
asking,
a gay man in America.
Marriage is a union of man and a woman. Okay, so that's one thing. It's a union of man and a woman. It benefits society. Society conveys benefits on that.
I asked you a very simple question. Do you think you are personally entitled to more rights than gay people in America? Yes or no?
No, of course not. But marriage is the union of a man and a woman. You have to redefine
okay, well, I'm glad
marriage.
to clear that up.
So
okay,
should two brothers be allowed to marry? Should two brothers be allowed to marry?
Say that again?
Should 2 grown brothers be allowed to marry? Or like in Germany, a grown brother and a grown sister who are separated in childhood fall in love.
You're now getting ridiculous.
Should they? Why is that ridiculous? There are cases in court about this.
You're just being silly, Dr. Brown.
Why is that ridiculous?
This is what happens.
Why is that ridiculous?
You're just being silly, Dr. Brown, and you know
Why
you
is
are.
it silly?
Let's read a statement.
50 years ago, it was silly to talk about a man marrying a man.
Whatever.
It's not silly.
Let me read a statement from. Let me read a statement. I'll come to you, Mark. Wait a minute. Let me read a statement from A&E Networks. We are extremely disappointed to have read Phil Robertson's comments in GQ, which are based on his own personal beliefs and are not reflected in the series Duck Dynasty. His personal views in nowhere reflect those of A&E Networks, who have always been strong supporters and champions of the LGBT community. The network has placed Phil under hiatus from filming indefinitely. One last question from Mark Lamont Hill, which is just about A&E here. I think A&E have been pretty courageous in what they've done, actually, and moving so swiftly to do this, given it's a $400 million business. I've got here on my desk all this merchandise from Duck Dynasty. I actually think it's pretty courageous. Do you think they've done the right thing, Mark Lamont Hill?
I'm not sure it's courageous.
Wow.
I don't think they're doing it to protect gay and lesbian. I think they might be invested in gay and lesbian rights. I think they might principally believe this. However, they're protecting that $415 million dynasty. They're worried that if they don't take this position, that people will run away from them. And they're right. Because as a viewer, I wouldn't watch it anymore. Many people wouldn't watch it anymore. There'd be too much controversy around it. So let's not romanticize their position.
I have to leave it there. We've got to leave it there. If you want to buy your bubbles, you can presumably go and buy one if you want to. I think I'll give it a miss. When we come back, a woman who's ever shy when it comes to speaking her mind, Star Jones. I'd love to hear what she's got to say about all this.